thank God that he's a God of another chance. If we look at verse number 4 again, the Bible says, and the vessel that was made of clay was marred in the hands of the potter. So he made it another vessel. Somebody say another vessel. That just simply means he gave you another chance. You was messed up, but God gave us another chance. And then the Bible says, I seemed good to the potter to make it over again. And is there anybody here, you're glad as I am that the loving and forgiving God that we serve, he didn't throw us away? Tell your neighbor, I'm glad God didn't throw me away. Even when man tried to throw me away, God said, no, there is still some good on the inside of you. God said, no, I can still use you in spite of what man thinks about you, in spite of what man says about you. God said there is still value in your life. And is there anybody here, you're glad that God didn't throw you away? Shout yeah! So we give God praise for another chance. High five your neighbor and tell him, God knows my value. I don't care what you think about me, I'm still a work in progress. And God knows my value. One thing about the God that I serve, I'm glad that he loved me for me. I'm glad that he didn't give up on me. Look at your neighbor and say, I'm still a work on the wheel. Because when I think about the potter, and when I think about the clay, and when I think about what God has to do in order to make us like he wants us to be, when I think about the old days and how the potter, he has the clay sitting on the wheel, and he begins to work with the clay on the wheel. He begins to fashion the clay on the wheel. And notice one thing about the potter: when the clay is spinning on the wheel, he has to make sure that he keeps the clay lubricated. He has to make sure that he keeps the clay wet. And one thing about that, I'm glad that I'm on the wheel, and God is the potter and I am the clay, because in order to keep me wet, he sprinkles his blood upon me every now and then, so that he can fashion me, so that he can make me. And while he's rubbing me with his right hand, with his powerful hand, and his feet is working so the wheel can continue to spin. One thing I like about God, when he feels a lump on the inside of us, he don't just work from the outside, but he works from the inside. Look at your neighbor and say, he works from the inside. That's why the Bible says that man looks on the outer appearance, but God, he looks at the heart. So while he's working on the wheel, the potter is working, and he don't come from the outside. But while the clay is spinning, God reaches his hand on the inside of the clay, and he works from the inside out. And whenever there's a lump, he feels the lump from the inside. And so when he feels it, he scoots it from the inside to the outside. And once he can get it to the outside of the clay, then he snatches it out of the clay. And if he got to make the clay over again, then he smashes the clay and he begins to work it over again. Tell your neighbor, I'm glad he looked beyond my faults and he saw my knees. I'm glad that he didn't throw me away. Is there anybody here? You're glad? Shout yeah! Glad he didn't throw me away. So grab your neighbor by the hand and say, neighbor, please be patient with me, because God is not through with me yet. I know I'm not where I should be, but thank God I'm not where I used to be. I don't have time to tell you what I used to be, because we'll be here all night long. But I thank God for another chance. Somebody shout, I thank God for another chance. Somebody in here right now, if you were to ask Jonah, Jonah would tell you you that he's a God of another chance. If you were to ask Peter, Peter will tell you that he's a God of another chance. If you were to ask somebody that's sitting on your row, they will tell you, I don't have to ask Peter. I don't have to ask Paul. I don't have to ask Mark. I know that he's a God of another chance for myself. And is there anybody here, you're glad that God saw the value on the inside of you? Give him a praise like you're going out of your mind and say, God, I thank you for giving me another chance in 2008. I thank you for allowing me to live to see another year. Put those hands together and give God praise for another chance. Somebody need to know right now that God is about to complete some stuff in your life. Why don't you encourage your neighbor and say, God is about to complete some stuff in your life. You won't always be where you are, because God says, I'm not speaking to you right now, but I'm speaking to you not yet. You will not always be broke. You will not always be sick. You will not always be depressed. You will not always be disgusted. You will not always be busted. God is about to bring you out. And is there anybody here, you're ready to come out? Shout yeah! Shout yeah! My God, I feel something about to bust loose in this place. I feel like God is getting ready to do some incredible stuff in this place right now. If you're ready for God to make some changes, lift your hands and say, God, here I am. Not my mother, not my father, not my sister, not my brother, but it's me. Oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. God, he shows us as we go through the text, he shows us in this text, when we look at what happens between the pot and the clay, he shows us how much of a patient God he is. And is there anybody here, you're glad that God has been patient with you? And the reason why we are still here is because he didn't give up on us. My mother probably would have gave up. My father probably would have gave up. My sister probably would have gave up. My brother probably would have gave up. My friends probably would have gave up. My pastor probably would have gave up. But one person I can depend on, that's Jesus. He never gives up on his children. He said, I'll never leave you, nor will I forsake you, but I'll be with you even until the end of the age. Through your this and your that, don't worry about a thing, because I got you covered. Look at your neighbor and say, I'm glad that God didn't give up on me. Come on, put those hands together and give God some praise. He took us through a process. Even though we were stubborn and inconsistent, God didn't give up on us. God didn't give up on us. Tell somebody, I'm begging you, please be patient with me, because God, he's not through with me yet. And so God says, tell my people, when I get through this time, I'm going to make them until it pleases me. Oh my God, watch this, because I realize that this has nothing to do with other people now. Touch your neighbor and say, it ain't about you no more. Tell them it's all about me right now. This has nothing to do with other people. I'm just tired of living my life trying to impress other people. I'm tired of living my life trying to get people to like me. I'm tired of living my life trying to get people to affirm me. I'm tired of living my life trying to please and make man happy. I want God to be pleased. I want God to be glorified. I want his people to be edified. And I want the devil to be horrified. And is there anybody here, You're glad that God didn't give up on you. That's why I give God praise. It's because of the potter and not because of the people. Yes. Slap somebody and tell them I'm a work in progress. Now watch this. Whenever you go into a museum and you see